Hi, my name's Deb Marriott and I'm a consultant nurse for allergy and for asthma, and this is How. And today we're going to talk to you about how to introduce potentially allergenic foods into your child's diet. So the first thing to think about is the reason why we would want to do this. And the reason is that we know from recent research that if you introduce foods into your child's diet early, then you reduce the risk of them becoming allergic to that food. And that includes foods such as peanut, egg and other nuts and sesame. And even if your child, like Hal, is allergic to another food, or if you've got a family history of food allergy, your child doesn't need to attend clinic and they don't need to have testing before you can start this procedure. All they need to be able to do is to be able to tolerate solid foods without choking. However, there are some simple rules to follow, and we'll put those up in a slide for you. Firstly, your child should be completely well. You should do this at home and not in a cafe or at a friend's house. And you should also make sure that you're not in a rush and you've got plenty of time to devote to looking at your child and checking whether or not they're reacting. Also, you should have some antihistamine available just in case they should react, and they shouldn't have antihistamine before you start for at least a week. So how should we introduce the food? Well, essentially, now we're in a safe environment, we're not in a rush. What we should do is take a small amount of the food. So here I've got a peanut crisp, and you will rub it on the inside of the child's lip like this. So just give it a quick rub, and then leave them to play happily for 10 minutes. Don't let them know that you're looking at them too closely, just leave them to their own devices, but just keep a small eye on them. And then after 10 minutes, if there's no reaction, then you can go on and give them a slightly larger portion. If you've attended one of our clinics, then you may have been given an information sheet. So we have early introduction of allergenic foods. We've got another leaflet on introducing peanuts into your child's diet. We've got another one on home introduction of lightly cooked egg, and then we've also got them on baked milk and baked products. So what should you be looking out for when you're feeding a child one of these foods? Essentially, it's just the common signs of an allergic reaction. And the most common things that we find in children would be swollen lips, swollen puffy eyes, maybe a bit of sneezing, maybe a runny nose. They could be sick, they may have a bit of diarrhea. They may develop a more widespread rash which spreads further over the body, and it may look a little bit like a nettle rash. Those kind of things are classed as a mild reaction. So they're not dangerous, they're not life-threatening, although they can be unpleasant, and you might want to treat them with a dose of the antihistamine that you will have ready. So how would you treat an allergic reaction? Essentially, all you need to do is to give your child a single dose of their antihistamine. And if you look at the bottle, on the label at the side, it will tell you what the dose is for your child or for their age group. If they're sick, you can repeat it. And then once you've given that, you just need to keep a close eye on them just for any change in the reaction. If it becomes worse, then you may need to take some further action, but this is really, really unlikely. And we should just cover the signs of an allergic reaction, which is more severe too, although this is really very rare in small children and infants. So the signs of an allergic reaction would include difficulty in breathing, and that may be associated with wheezing or profuse coughing, or they may become floppy and limp, and if that does happen, you should call 999. So once you've successfully introduced foods into your child's diet, what should you do then? So ideally, you should continue to feed your child that food about 3 times a week. And there is some evidence that suggests that if you don't feed that food to your child, then they can become allergic in the future. So for example, if you fed your child peanuts on one occasion, they were fine, and then you took it out of their diet and avoided it for the longer term future, maybe next time they ingest it in 5 or 10 years time, they could be allergic by then and have a reaction. So it's really important to keep it in their regular weekly diet. So moving forward, we're going to think about 2 specific foods which people commonly are concerned about introducing into their child's diet. So the first of these is peanuts. In 2015, there was a now famous research study called the LEAP study, which was performed in London. And the LEAP study took 640 children aged between 4 and 11 months, and half of them were given peanuts 3 times a week until the age of 5, and the other half were advised to avoid peanuts completely from their child's diet until they were 5. And when they were 5, they were challenged to peanuts, so they were fed peanut in hospital, and the rates of peanut allergy were compared between the two groups. Approximately 14% of the children who had avoided peanuts since infancy had become allergic to peanuts, whereas less than 2% of those children who had introduced it before the age of 11 months proved to be peanut allergic. So it's definitely something that's really worth doing. We've produced a leaflet called Introducing Peanuts into Your Infant's Diet, which may be helpful, but essentially we'll outline it for you here as well. So the first thing is to make sure that your infant is already able to eat solid foods without the risk of choking. And you should never give nuts which aren't ground up or processed in some way to a young child under 5. So the first thing that you would need to do would be to offer your child a small amount of peanuts. So we recommend Bamba Snack, which is it looks like a What's-It, but it's 50% peanut. And they can use it as a finger food, so you would offer them a small amount of that. Or for a young baby, you can mix it with water in a kind of weaning paste and use that instead. So once they've had the small amount of food as a test dose, and you've waited 10 minutes, if nothing happens, then you can give them a small portion of that food and just watch them to see what happens. If they do have a reaction, then obviously you will go and treat that, as we've explained before. And you're ideally aiming to give your child 2 grams of peanuts per portion. And then, if they don't react, we would hope that you would continue to do that 3 times a week. And there are various ways that you can give peanuts to your child, and these are all covered in our leaflet. The first one is to give them the Bamba Snack as shown. The other option is to thin out some smooth peanut butter with water. So if you were to take 1 teaspoon of peanuts, then you should add 1 to 2 teaspoons of water to that and mix it together, and that just minimises the reduced risk of choking. The third option is to mix some peanut butter with an equivalent amount of pureed fruits or vegetables, and again you can add water to that if you want to. And then finally you can buy peanut flour. And if you were going to use peanut flour in a product, then it would be worth taking 2 teaspoons of peanut flour and mixing that with 2 tablespoons of pureed fruit or vegetables. The other food we're going to think about introducing is baked egg. So we know that if egg is baked, for example in a fairy cake, that reduces the protein structure, and many people who are allergic to egg will not recognise it as an allergen. About 70% of egg allergic children will outgrow their egg allergy by the time they go to secondary school, and most will have had mild reactions. There's also some evidence that suggests that if you eat the baked egg regularly, that can desensitise you to egg, and that essentially means that you may outgrow it faster. So again, we're just going to summarise how you would introduce egg to your child. So first of all, you need to bake a batch of 8 fairy cakes, and we would recommend a recipe of 1 egg, 4 ounces of caster sugar, 4 ounces of self-raising flour, and 4 ounces of margarine. And then, as before with the peanut, you take a small crumb of cake, like we have here, for a tiny amount, and you just rub it on the inside of your child's lips. And again, you would wait 10 minutes to see what happens. And then you can leave them to play. And if they're still fine half an hour later, then you can give them a pea-sized amount, so this kind of quantity. If they don't react to that, then a couple of days later, you should give them a portion size which is double that amount, so something like this. So 2 peas worth. And then you carry on like this, so every 2 days you would increase the portion, double the portion of cake that you're giving your child, until they manage to consume the whole cake without reacting. And then once they can eat the whole fairy cake without reacting, you should start again from the beginning, but use a recipe containing 2 eggs instead of 1, and work your way up until they can tolerate 1 whole fairy cake containing 2 eggs in the mixture. If your child has a reaction at any stage, then go back to the dose that they could tolerate, and go back a couple of steps beyond that, and then continue to feed them that on a regular basis. If you take it out of their diet completely, then again you run the risk of them becoming allergic to that food by avoiding it. But we would recommend that you only feed them that food yourself when you're at home, and not that people out of the home environment, for example, a friend's parent or grandparent, feed them that food. And finally, I'd just like to say thank you for your time in watching this video, and we hope it's been useful.